Good evening. I've been waiting all day for this. I'm very excited. Please allow me to introduce myself quickly again. My name is Ashton Berkhauer, and I'm representing uSwitch for Business. I'm going to explain a little bit about two other brands that we also have. One is called Business Juice, and one is called Energy Forecaster. Now, as has already been mentioned, I'm here to present on consumers' requirements and expectations. Now, I can promise that this will last no more than 20 minutes, because I know that I am undecided at this stage as whether the graveyard shift is the best place to be, because I know that the drinks are on ice and the canapes are probably ready, so we will whistle through. Now, you may have been aware that this particular slot was originally going to be filled by Audrey Gallagher from Consumer Focus, who are, of course, the statutory consumer champion. I believe the session at the time was titled "The Top 10 Ways to Be Unpleasant and Make an Energy Company Feel Uncomfortable." Well, I'm pleased to say that I'm not going to quite do it from that angle. Not being the statutory consumer champion, I am going to tackle things slightly differently. What's been interesting about all of the conversations and presentations that have been done today is that largely it's been about the gas industry, it's been about the pipelines, it's been about trading, where the flows are going. Graham and myself are doing something and talking about things that are very micro in comparison. As David has already said, it's all about the end customer and the expectations that they have. So, just to give you a quick outline of where we're going. So, a quick bit about uSwitch for Business. What are the demands of a customer today? Which industries are hitting the mark and who is missing a trick? Where do energy companies appear to be lacking? Sorry, that's quite leading, isn't it? Domestic versus non-domestic, and what the Business Energy Barometer uncovered, and I will explain what that is in a bit more detail later, and what about the future. So, just quickly, what is uSwitch for Business? uSwitch for Business is a sister company to uSwitch.com, which is the very popular, in fact the market-leading domestic energy comparison site. They have over 1 million unique visitors a month. Now, in the process of doing what they do, they were receiving a great deal of non-domestic leads, and as a result, it made sense for us to try and capitalise on them. So we created a new organisation in the form of uSwitch for Business. The company itself has only been around since 2011, that's when it's incorporated, so it's very young, but we are experienced for our years because of the activity that we do. We service thousands of businesses every month. We are impartial, we are independent, and we're very proud of the fact that we're trying to change the market. For example, we were one of the first third-party intermediaries to include a customer charter that was very open around disclosure of commissions. So, we also have Business Juice and energyforecaster.co.uk. So I mentioned them briefly, and they're the two logos. So Business Juice is an alternative trading name to uSwitch for Business. So with the domestic orientated roots of uSwitch and uSwitch for Business, we decided that we needed a fresh approach as well, and an alternative, so that if customers aren't being immediately dismissing the uSwitch brand because they didn't think they did businesses, and my business is more important and more professional than that, so we have an alternative. In the same vein, we also launched a content-focused comparison site called Energy Forecaster. So the idea behind the Energy Forecaster is that it's to convince potential customers that energy switching is something they can't afford not to be involved in, and they mustn't ignore it. So we want to help them understand the potential impact that the changes in the energy market can have on their bottom line. The Energy Forecaster has an independent panel of experts, and I may say they're very, very good, one of which is in the room. So I have to say that. And they provide expertise on a variety of different subject matters, including regulation, trading, energy efficiency, a range of different things. We also have a quarterly Business Energy Barometer, which I will go into a little more detail on a bit later. So, what are the demands of a customer today? I think it's important to set the scene. So I want to cut the bigger energy suppliers a little bit of slack. We operate in a retail environment that is obviously largely dominated by 6 players, and that's not news to anyone. But there's an interesting stat here, and I'll apologise now because there's a lot of stats you're going to get from me, because these are all about public opinion and the consumer's expectations, of course. So this is from the UK Customer Satisfaction Index, and it says every 10% of market share gained by dominant companies leads to a 1.5% fall in customer satisfaction. Now, arguably, that means, well, no matter what the big 6 are going to do, it's not going to work. But equally, it means that from a new entrant's point of view, there's a fantastic opportunity there to bring in something special. And I think Graham's already alluded to that fact that they're trying to do that in Utilita. So, there's some research that was carried out by OC&C strategy consultants, and they've defined some megatrends, as they like to call them, in terms of customer requirements and expectations. The first one is polarisation. So consumers have become more sophisticated about choosing what sort of service they want and when. Crucially, this is no longer driven solely by affordability. Individual consumers will mix and match, making different decisions about different situations. The factor which drives the decision about the service levels is the consumer's level of intellectual, emotional engagement with the purchase. So unfortunately, that's perhaps not great when it comes to energy supply. So where the consumer is engaged, the service experience is a core part of the purchase. For more functional and everyday purchases, for example utilities or heavens above a toilet roll, the consumer has a limited desire to engage, and they just want an efficient vending machine style transaction, but they need it at the right price. The second trend is personalisation. So the most successful customer service companies are aggressively pursuing ways to tailor service levels to each consumer and make the service feel more personal. In many ways, personalisation is a bit regressive, because we've come from that and we've gone to, we're returning to this personal touch, bespoke service relationship of the past. The mass production service of recent years, it might have cost reduction, but it is very impersonal. And with the technology that we have available today, there isn't any reason why we can't get back to that personal touch. It comes down to the bottom line being one size does not fit all. The third one is whenever and wherever. Consumers are all channel hoppers. There's a wide range of channels in which energy companies are going to engage with customers, and they need to make sure that all of the messages are consistent. So, for example, obviously post, phone, face-to-face are still key, but text message, email, Facebook, Twitter, social networking sites, etc. Are all jostling for attention, and you need to be able to make sure you approach the customer in a fair way across them. So if a customer rang in to complain, very few people will know about that complaint other than the call handler. So you may just think to shrug and go, okay, of course we'll deal with it. If that complaint comes across via Twitter, actually that's in the public domain, and you might be thinking, all hell's going to break loose because we can pick up this momentum of unpleasant feedback about us. But the reality is, regardless of how the customer contacts you, it should be the same resolution and the same course of action that you're taking with it. So, which industries are hitting the mark and who is missing a trick? This is a slide, again, from the Institute of Customer Service and their UK Customer Satisfaction Index. Hopefully you can see it okay. It's a little bit fuzzy on my screen. So as you'll see from the graph, it's utilities that are settled at the bottom. I was thinking of the idea of doing a little poll and say, where do you think utilities would come? But you may have already had an idea that it would come there. I mean, this could be aligned to an earlier point of mine relating to energy companies not having the level of engagement with customers. And again, that may not be because of your own fault or their own fault. It's because it's the type of relationship the customer wishes to have with you. So the reality is the customers have smaller demands, but those demands are expected to be delivered faultlessly when required. The really disturbing thing for me, though, when looking at this, is actually in January 12, so 6 months on from the grey bar, things have got worse. So the key thing is understanding why it's got worse, of course. However, looking on the bright side, I don't know whether you would have seen, my background isn't just energy, it's from financial services as well. So I was quite interested to see that the Office of Fair Trading are going to be investigating motor insurance with the view that overinflated claims has put up premiums. So you never know, maybe when this is done next time, it'll be insurance companies that have dropped down the rankings a little bit. Although how banking or banks manage to stay where they are is, I guess, a little bit beyond me, bearing in mind where we've been with them recently. So, I mean, this survey is based on the feedback from 26,000 consumers. So it's a big chunk, and I think it's fair to say statistically valid. So, you know, it can be taken with some insight. So, where do energy companies appear to be lacking? Again, when I was doing my preparation for this, I was putting out various studies and goodness knows what else. And the Institute of Customer Service, the Customer Satisfaction Index 2012, did have some really good stuff, and hence I'm sharing that with you now. So, I mean, the slide's already up there and the graph's already there, so you're probably looking at it. But I think there's a big difference between customer states of mind and the actions that they make. Switching energy supplier is one clear indication that a customer is unhappy. Now, you could say this is purely down to price, but in reality, that is still something that they're unhappy with. So, as a general rule, when customers tend to talk about their switching behaviour, they do tend to overestimate their propensity to switch. So, nevertheless, relatively few customers think that rising prices have made them more likely to switch supplier. So, how likely are you to switch energy supplier? As you can see, people are pretty nondescript or very unlikely in relation to this. Just less than half, 47% of the customers that were interviewed, said that they intended to monitor others' providers' tariffs with a view to switching, but over 80% said they intended to keep a closer eye on their own provider's bill. But just because they aren't switching doesn't mean that they're happy. Okay? In relation to the importance of customer service for energy providers, customers are asked whether customer service has become more important for them when choosing an energy provider, and the majority thought that it had. So if we look here to the far left, you've got very important, that's 30%, and then of course moving down to unimportant down on the right hand side of the screen. So 68% of customers said that they would consider switching energy provider as a result of poor customer service, although in reality only 26% of them said that they'd ever done switching or they'd ever switched. So to button down customers' attitudes to tariffs and switching, the survey went into 3 statements on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being strongly agreeing and 5 being strongly disagree. So the statements are, as you can see on the screen, switching energy provider is now much easier than it used to be. So there's a good chunk there. It's difficult to know which provider is cheapest as their tariffs are complicated. Okay, I think there's definitely something that we should take note of there. And finally, with all utilities firms pushing up prices, I want a provider that is easy to deal with and offers understandable tariffs. So again, we're getting quite an insight here into where customers feel that perhaps they're being let down. One final chart that I'd like to show in relation to where energy companies appear to be lacking is from a survey that the domestic side of uSwitch does on an annual basis. So this is the uSwitch.com customer satisfaction survey. Now they do this annually, and this is unfortunately the most recent one was from November last year, so we're expecting a new one to come out very, very soon. So you'll see that the best performing year was in fact 2010, where the level of satisfied customers was slightly over 70%. There's been a general level of improvement in the scores over the 5 years that they've been doing the survey, but it's disappointing to see that, of course, October 11 did see a dip and it dropped. It lost over 10%. Now, I'm sure any of the marketing teams or customer service departments within the energy companies could hypothesise as to why that was the case, but I think largely some might suggest that it's to do with price rises. So some of the key information from the survey was just that 4 in 10 customers, so 42%, think that suppliers offer value for money. Okay, and that was a 17% drop from the previous year, while just over a third thought that their supplier had them on the best deal. There were 2, or should I say 3 top areas where there was generally the highest satisfaction scores. So one of them where the customers seemed to be quite positive was the transfer process between suppliers. Another area was billing, which is very good news, and finally just general customer service scored quite highly. However, just because these are the areas where some of the surveys scored the highest, that doesn't necessarily mean they're massively positive. It could just be that in reality this is the best of a bad bunch. In terms of the bottom areas that came out of the survey, the issues where customers scored the lowest were around reward schemes. Now, largely many energy companies don't have reward schemes. I mean, BG has Nectar, E.ON have dabbled with Tesco Club Card points in the past. But I think it's important to equally say reward schemes aren't to be confused with marketing acquisition gifts. The other areas where the scores were quite low was energy efficiency and online experience. Now, again, in the 2011 survey, the online experience questions scored higher than they had ever done in the past. So it goes to show that progress is being made, but it's still a relatively low score in comparison to all the other areas of the survey. So what I would say about this survey is it only focuses on the big six, and that's not through choice. That's purely down to the fact that in order for it to be statistically valid, you have to have a certain number of respondents that fall into each supplier. And you know, when we're talking or trying to get these customers to fill in the survey, we don't pick, or we'll take that 10 because they're from BG and we'll take that 10 because they're from First Utility. It's done completely random, and we have no idea what mix of suppliers we're going to get as we go through the survey. But unfortunately, if we don't have enough respondents from a particular supplier, they have to be excluded from the results. All of this breakdown by year, by question type, by category is all available, and if you wish to have that information, please feel free to let me know, or it would be available on the uSwitch website. So, something that I want to quickly move on to now is the differences between domestic and non-domestic in the sector. Now, you may all be very aware of the differences between domestic and non-domestic. Now, I come from uSwitch for Business, so the non-domestic side is really quite important to me right now. Now, there's a lot more transparency around the domestic activity and dissatisfaction. Of course, there's consumer focus for a start, and they're willing to shout about the issues affecting domestic customers, and more recently including micro businesses. In fact, only today there was another report that came out from Consumer Focus in association with Cornwall Energy, looking at the micro business market. Obviously, of course, more recently as well, Ofgem's been throwing its weight around in relation to fines regarding doorstep selling. But unfortunately, there's some big discrepancies between what we see in domestic and non-domestic. You know, there's far from a level playing field. And as I'm sure you can appreciate, as I said, I'm coming from a non-domestic segment, so I couldn't let this opportunity pass. So while, of course, there is a cost to regulation, the benefits accrue to both businesses and the consumers concerned in relation to changes that can be made. If the distinction continues between domestic and non-domestic businesses, they will inevitably be treated as second-class citizens. Now, I'm going to go out there on a limb and suggest that it should be comparatively easy to extend protections as they already exist for domestic customers. Now, many people will disagree and say that's far too much hard work and it's not as easy as that at all. However, the framework's there. It's just a case of expanding it and elaborating on it. I mean, are we allowed to imagine a world where there's a mechanism to develop a voluntary or self-regulatory initiative, almost like an Energy UK equivalent for the non-domestic sector? But certainly we'd like to see that. So anyway, on the table that we've got in front of you, and I will apologise because under debt and disconnection I've put the ERA there. It's not the ERA, but old habits die hard, unfortunately. So all of these, I doubt any of these are new to you, but in relation to back billing rules, of course, where the supplier's at fault, it protects customers and incentivises suppliers to get billing right, but again, only in the domestic sector. Last year, 40% of all consumer direct billing business issues concerned back billing. Now, businesses face back billing periods of up to 6 years, as the table says, which might easily mean for a small to medium-sized business a bill of £60,000. Now, in reality, an energy company can demand payment of that almost immediately, and in the event that they don't get payment of that, they can do, they can certainly pressurise quite heavily, certainly not how they would do it in the domestic market, and equally they can disconnect the customer without too much notice at all. Something else that I'll just bring out, I mean, recently Ed Davey told the Association of Convenience Stores that businesses can look after their own interests when it comes to energy. Now, in my opinion, this is very blasé and very short-sighted attitude. We're at a time when we're hoping that homegrown businesses, the small and medium, and even the larger enterprises that we have in the UK are going to continue to take us further away from recession and put this country back into a position of growth. Now, assuming that is the case, I'm not sure that Ed's really playing the same game or following in the same footsteps there. So, that's my little rant over the difference between domestic and non-domestic over. So I'm now going to quickly talk about the Business Energy Barometer. Now, our Business Energy Barometer takes the temperature of UK businesses and finds out what way the wind is blowing on a range of energy issues. In case you couldn't tell, I took that bit straight from the website. So the data comes from a survey of 500 people who are responsible for energy in their businesses, and it's conducted by an independent research association, so there's no deliberate fudging of results for us to try and get something out of it that we want. So, And again, I am going to apologise now because I'm about to throw a whole load of stats at you, and feel free to pay attention to the ones you want and don't to some of them. But some of them I've got in this pretty infographic, and others I haven't. So businesses are very worried about energy prices. 30% of businesses say that if energy prices continue to rise by 15% a year, it will have catastrophic or very serious consequences on their business. In fact, 7%, so that's equivalent to over 300,000 companies, are saying that it could even force them to shut. 25% say that if business energy prices rose by 9 to 10%, they would have to do something about it. So, they switch to get a good deal. 61% of businesses say that they switched their energy supplier in the last 12 months, which is good. That suggests that competition is working. And 62% of businesses that switched in the last 12 months plan to switch so again in the next year. And 72% say they're planning to switch to lower their overall bill. But some businesses are apathetic about the market. 22% say that while they're aware of their bills, they don't have the time or motivation to switch. And 30% say there's no competition in the market, all the suppliers are the same, so there's no point in switching. That doesn't bode well, does it? Others don't know key pieces of information about their contract. 11% aren't confident that they know when their business energy contract is due to end. 26% aren't confident that they know how much energy they use. 22% aren't confident they'd know how much notice they'd have to give to cancel their contract, which might explain why so many have been rolled, of course. 32% of businesses say they've actually been rolled over. 19% say that they were rolled because there was no correspondence from their energy supplier. Now, of course, if that was true, that's not an acceptable place to be. So rollover, of course, as you can imagine, is very unpopular. 68% agree that rollover contracts are unfair. 26% disagree that rollover contracts reduce bureaucracy and admin for customers, which is perhaps a line that energy companies might have used in the past around rollover. 83% agree that they would prefer to always give their consent for energy contract to be rolled over, so in terms of beforehand. 85% agree that the government should force energy suppliers to be more transparent by printing contract end dates on bills. Now, of course, I know that E.ON, I don't know whether you would have noticed over the last, I think it was beginning of this week, back end of last week, actually put out a statement saying that they are going to put contract end dates on all of their bills. So, thumbs up for E.ON if anyone's from here. 81% agree that the government should enable businesses to change energy supply at the end of their agreed contract term without termination windows. And 55% agree that the government should ban rollover contracts, full stop. You'll be pleased to know it's the last stat I'm going to throw at you right now. So, but just going back, there's one statistic that I'd like to reiterate and leave it with you. There's no competition in the market and all the suppliers are the same, so there's no point in switching. You may not have heard it before, it may not become as any surprise, but you would have heard today a number of times where everybody's saying there's great competition in the market. Now, as you may have heard before, perception is 9/10 of the truth. So do we work in a competitive market? We tell ourselves we work in a competitive market, but the view of many customers is that in reality we don't. So, what about the future? There's some really basic things that I'm just going to go through now, and you're going to think, well, this is a bit simple, but in reality they're all very important to the end customer. Okay, so answer the phone. Make sure someone's picking up the phone when someone calls your business. Notice I say someone rather than some kind of IVR or any other type of thing that we can now try and put customers through. Don't make promises unless you plan to keep them. Reliability is one of the key issues in relation to any relationship. You have to have promises that are kept, and trust. Think before you give any promise, because nothing annoys a customer more than a broken one. Listen to your customers. Is there anything more exasperating than telling someone what you want from them or what your problem is, and then discovering that person hasn't been paying any attention to at all? So from a customer's viewpoint, I doubt it. Let the customer talk and let them know that you're listening. Deal with complaints. No one likes hearing complaints, and many of us have developed the shrug, or you can't please all of the people all of the time. Maybe not, but if you give the complaint your attention, you may be able to please this one person this one time and position your business to reap the benefits of changes that you can implement off the back of that. Now, Many energy companies will say, well, they are basic things and I'm already doing all of those. So for example, you've got British Gas with the Customer Panel Initiative, you've got E.ON with its Reset Review campaign, you've got Empower and the Brighter Energy Debate. Now forgive me for not mentioning everybody's initiatives, but I'm pretty sure that you will all have one. But in spite of all this activity, there's still a downward trend in satisfaction scores, as we've seen from two separate pieces of independent research. So is it because energy companies are listening, but they're not actioning, or is it because there's this holy grail of supreme customer engagement that is never really going to be achieved? Because in actual fact, the customer just wants this vending machine style transaction with their energy company. So, in summary, give customers what they want. It probably isn't the latest electronic digital display, which also feeds the dog, or in Graham's case, the dead dog. It isn't being able to have a price. It's being able to have a price that's good value and not having to pay more than a customer which hasn't even joined you yet. Why should I pay more than that guy just because you're trying to entice them to be a customer? To be able to talk to you when they need to, especially if it's because of a problem. Make sure that they know that you appreciate their custom and that the customer isn't just a revenue stream that you're going to replace quite quickly if they leave. And use all available methods or channels to allow them to contact you. Energy companies are catching up on the internet issue. I mentioned that earlier on. But actually the future is all about tablets. It's all about fourth generation mobile. So what have you done to stay on top of that? Great, I've got a website now where a customer can enter their meter reading. Lots of other types of industries or business would have had that type of functionality 5 years ago. So where do you take it from here? So ultimately, a customer, whether that's domestic or non-domestic, wants openness, honesty, and the removal of any unnecessary and largely perceived unfair red tape and the small print that hinders them from doing what they want when they want. So just coming back to a point that, in fact, Olivia mentioned earlier. So when a market makes it easy, people are happy to engage, and I thought that was really interesting because you're suggesting that's what traders are doing in Europe. Well, in the same vein, that's what customers want to be able to do in the UK energy market. So let's make it simple for them, and then we really can prove that we have a competitive energy market. Thank you very much.